So I've just been out to get some essential shopping, and it's definitely a bit of a surreal atmosphere. It's the first time I've done a significant shopping because I've been observing the lockdown. I've been staying at home, following the advice, but there were some things I did need. And there were people around. It wasn't totally dead. I'm talking about Sunderland city centre, but still quite a surreal atmosphere. It was like I don't know how to describe it. I was going to say it's like a Sunday when shops close earlier, but not even like that because even on Sundays, regular shops are open. So in the local shopping centre here, if you know Sunderland, the Bridges shopping centre, Iceland was open, Tesco's was open, and one or two other shops that sold food, but there were lights off in the main atrium of the building. It just strange atmosphere. And they had security guards sort of making sure that people kept the distance in the queue. Oh, it wasn't a long queue, but people lining up outside Tesco, which is necessary. I support it, but it's definitely a surreal atmosphere. Um, as I said, I think I've said in a previous video, when I make updates on the statistics, they will likely be out of date by the time the video is uploaded because the way this thing is going, it's obviously it changes every day. But the latest statistics from the UK is that we have 1,448 deaths and 23,000 cases. Now, 1,448, if that's on top of the figure yesterday, that's kind of good news because that's a big slowdown. So the figure yesterday was 1,408. If that's accurate, that means only 30 people have died in that period, which is certainly a big slowdown from the 200 the day before. But this may not be, totally accurate. There may be, like at the end of the day, it may be a lot higher. We're not seeing the sort of hikes, I think, that France, Spain, Italy, and indeed the United States are seeing. So that's something. The lockdown is showing some signs of working. Dominic Raab has made a big announcement about trying to help British nationals abroad. I really, really sympathise with them. Just read in the cover of the Times today, a young woman from Leeds. It says Esther Hulme, 25 of Leeds, is among the Britons stranded in Goa, which is in India. After her flights were stopped, she said she and her partner were surviving on handouts. So the Foreign Secretary's pledged £75 million airlift for Britons stranded on holiday, and this is an unprecedented event, a repatriation for some 300,000 Britons. Sometimes when we see a conflict situation arise in a country, whether it be Libya or Syria, we see sort of an evacuation of British personnel. But I don't think there's anything been ever on this scale. Maybe I'm thinking maybe the aftermath of the Indian Ocean tsunami in 2004 could have seen something on a large scale, but not on this scale. Anyway, what I want to talk about in this video is, oh, and one more thing, just in case I don't get a chance to make a video specifically about it, although we would like to. The official figure in China, I do not believe for a second. Officially, about 3,300 people have died in China as a whole. I find that very hard to believe because there's been reports that there have been a growing number of burial urns, crematory urns appearing in Wuhan, and there have been a lot of them prepared for the Qingming festival, which in Chinese culture is a sort of ancestors festival. A lot more than 3,300. In fact, there's speculation that in Wuhan alone, there could be as many as 42,000 dead, which is conceivable when you consider it's a city of 11 million people. Well, between 9 and 11 million, depending on how you look at the definition of that. But it's a big city, and that's very conceivable. So, assuming that Wuhan's the hardest hit part of China, then it is very conceivable the figure in China is going to be 50,000. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I certainly don't believe the Chinese Communist Party to tell the truth about the true figure when they've hidden so many other dark events in their history. like the Great Famine of 1958 to 1961, which was the most catastrophic famine in human history. Tens of millions died in that event. Anyway, apologies, I'll get to the point here. This is a cover of today's Metro. Sickening abuse on frontline. I don't know how these people have um, such patience and tolerance because, unlike police officers or soldiers, they can't fight back. They can't defend themselves. So we're hearing an increasing number of cases of nurses and other medical personnel getting spat at, getting abused. I feel disgusted and shocked, but I'm afraid not surprised. We have a yob culture in this country, and even before this crisis, there had been a lot of problems with abuse of staff, by drunks, by people who weren't going to, don't listen to reason. I've personally seen it, not on NHS staff, but I've seen the police getting abused. I recently had an incident. I'll just make this quick because I don't want to detract from the main point of the video, but I was coming home from the cinema before the lockdown, obviously, and I saw a guy who was kind of pinned against a fence, and a woman who obviously knew him thought he'd been stabbed. So he looked like he was unconscious. So I thought, okay, well, if this guy's been seriously hurt, I'll use my scarf. Maybe I could use it as some sort of, this could be a very serious situation. While the police arrive, while the ambulance arrives, well, as it turned out, it wasn't that badly injured. And he was sort of like, I thought he was unconscious. I was trying to like get him into a decent position because he was literally hanging upside down from a fence. So I kind of on tangled him from that. Big guy, well built, and then he suddenly turned on me. Grabbed my legs. He was like, "Who are you? Who are you?" Now maybe he was confused, but when the police arrived, because the woman had thought he'd been stabbed, she knew him actually. He hadn't been stabbed, but he started mouthing off to them. He said he wouldn't want their effing help, and we were all telling him we were trying to help. That's what I told him. It didn't really hurt me, but it did shock me a little bit when he suddenly sprung into life. Anyway, he was mouthing off to the police when they arrived, and they were, I have to say, they were totally civil, totally patient, and just trying to work out what happened. So I've seen it. These are some of the things that are being reported. Victims have included carer Amy Hall, who was spat at when she made a quick trip to Lidl during her rounds in Waterlooville, Hampshire, and Sammy Shally, who works at the Christie Hospital in Manchester, was spat on repeatedly by a cyclist as she walked home at the end of a 10-hour shift. She prompted the disgusting response merely by asking him to give her some space when he rode up close. This is the victim. Innocent young woman. And this lady, Amy Hall, spat on in Waterlooville. There was an unnamed Filipino nurse. I believe it was also in Hampshire. I'll just double check that. I'm just disgusted reading this. Yeah, in Southampton, was told to go back to China. She's Filipina anyway, but even if she was Chinese, it's disgusting. By a group of 8 teenage yobs who confronted her as she walked home after working a 12-hour shift helping virus patients. So minority staff are getting racial abuse. And there's a long catalogue of stuff like this. There was an RSPCA officer who was attacked in Hull by yobs who claimed they had the virus because she was trying to untangle a swan that they'd abused. I really do wonder at the sort of degenerates that are in our society. Well, they're enemies of society. I think abusing NHS staff is bad at any time, but in this crisis, it's just. And the thing is, NHS bosses are condemning it and saying how awful it is. That we don't. Condemnation isn't enough. We need to see consequences. And I understand in these circumstances, you can't have trials as would be normal. But I honestly think this is so degenerate. It's so sick that to attack these heroes. It was great to see that response across the country clapping for our carers. But we need to remember they get abuse like this as well, not just during this crisis, but regularly by drunks, by idiots who can't work out that they're actually trying to help them. I mean, they've even been accused of spreading the virus. It just defies comprehension. So I really think we need to get serious with this after the pandemic's over. I would say their details should be taken where possible and let them quiver for a while. Put their names on record, let them quiver. Don't do anything now because everyone's in lockdown, or most people are. So it wouldn't make sense to put them, on trial with a jury, etc. But take their names, and when this thing ends, let them worry about it for all that time. Then send them to some sort of military camps. I'm not talking about, physically abusing them, but I'm talking about really, really, really treating them like the enemies of society that they are. But more than that, making them understand that this is can't be accepted. And any notion of rehabilitation or we need to just understand them, give them a little fine, something like that, it just doesn't cut it. It just doesn't. I have to say, and this is not hot air, this is my sincere, sincere view. If I had a girlfriend or a sister who was an NHS nurse and something like this happened to them, my blood would be boiling. I'd really want, I'd probably break the rules going out trying to find the yobs. And the thing is, NHS staff are such, they're in the business of saving lives and looking after people. So for many of them, it's just not in their nature to fight back. I'm not saying that's universal. I'm sure plenty of them can physically stand up for themselves. But, what sort of scumbags would target an innocent young woman who's worked a long shift saving lives? Absolute vermin, as far as I'm concerned. I'm almost nullified to the things that are going on out there. There's a lot of good in society. There's a lot of decent people who help their neighbours, who abide by the regulations. Certainly NHS staff, and not just the NHS, they rightly get a lot of praise. But let's also consider others, the farmers. Farmers are unsung heroes. They're providing food. Um, and then you have the other end of society, which is these degenerate yobs. Just people without any sort of sense of empathy for other human beings. They disgust me to the absolute core. So yeah, I say they have to face consequences, whether they're now or at a later date. And sadly, in some of these circumstances, it'll be very hard to track them down. I just hope that they something happens in their life to scare them into changing. They might find that one of their loved ones gets a virus, and then it just and they're at their bedside or whatever, and it takes a nurse or doctor to save that person. But this has to be we have to have an end of soft touch Britain. Weak judges giving them a tap on the wrist. It's not an attack on all judges, but we have a problem in this country with judges who just, particularly with young offenders, That's all I have to say about it. Because I could talk all day about this. There's something seriously deranged about people who attack a nurse who's just doing their job. I don't understand it. Right. Thanks for watching.